This episode is brought to you by Columbia Sportswear. It's snowing again, and that wind chill is killer. But you're not worried about that because you shop the Omni Heat Infinity Collection. It's warmth perfected with tiny gold dots that reflect your body heat inside and protect you from the cold outside. No snow or chilly temps can stop you now. Go out anyway. Shop the Omni Heat Infinity Collection now at Columbia.com/infinity.
In sports, the scoreboard doesn't tell the full story, but Netflix does. Stories about dads who happen to be world-class quarterbacks and a battle for the heart, soul, and direction of the multi-billion-dollar business of F1. Whether you're a diehard fan or you're brand new, Netflix has the stories for every type of fan. You can watch these incredible sports stories like Quarterback, F1 Drive to Survive, Untold, and many more now on Netflix.
Apple Card is the credit card created by Apple. You earn 3% daily cash back up front when you use it to buy a new iPhone 15, AirPods, or any products at Apple. And you can automatically grow your daily cash at 4.15% annual percentage yield when you open a high-yield savings account. Apply for Apple Card in the Wallet app on iPhone. Apple Card subject to credit approval. Savings is available to Apple Card owners subject to eligibility. Savings accounts by Goldman Sachs Bank USA, member FDIC. Terms apply.
Serie Chronicles is a Mina Chronicles production.
Welcome to our Serie Chronicles Q&A episode for the week. We're back for our mailbag. We're back with your questions, myself and Mina Rizuki. Mina, how are you doing? Long time no see.
I know, it's been like ages. I've moved countries. I'm joking. I'm good.
Good. I'm going to jump right in with our first question, which comes from Intertwined at Rtwined on Twitter. Question for Mina. Do you feel Juve's current midfield depth is conducive to what Allegri is trying to do? Intertwine actually sent us two questions. You can see the same document that I can see. So why don't I ask you that one, then you can read the second question to me.
Okay. So it's conducive to what Allegri is trying to do. I don't know what... I actually don't know how to answer this question, to be honest with you, because I don't really think there is a midfield depth. So I think that's the whole point, right? Is what he's trying to do. I think the best midfield that we can do right now is to just shove Locatelli next to somebody who can play well, or allow him to play well or do what it is that he needs to do. I like a 4-4-2, or sort of like a 4-3-1-2 formation. I think it will bring out the best of this team. I'm not really keen on 3-man back lines, but, whatever decides to work. But right now, I'd love to see Arthur alongside Locatelli. Arthur. I called him Arthur. Is it Arthur? Artur? Anyway, next to Locatelli, Artur. I'm not a huge fan of Bentancur. I do think that he's better when he is next to Locatelli. It's an interesting midfield, but I think the way that right now Allegri's designed it is that it minimally doesn't expose them as much as it ought to, because midfield is sort of the weakest straw right now. And this is something that he in particular has always wanted to strengthen. So after the Champions League win in 2017, when Agnelli asked him what it is that he wanted, he said, I really want a midfield. I want options. I want to be able to look at my bench and not have Lamina sitting there, but having alternatives that I could bring in the way that Zidane had alternatives, where he can introduce the likes of Asensio and Gareth Bale and Alvaro Morata to win the game. That was something that unfortunately wasn't available because there was just not that kind of depth. Instead, eventually they bought Ronaldo, and it was a wonderful player to bring in. But I think what Allegri's always wanted was a packed midfield, and he really wanted Locatelli more than anyone, which is why I think he had to make certain sacrifices for Szczesny and Donnarumma. Not bringing him in, especially considering the contract that Szczesny is on. So I don't know what it is that he's trying to do. He is trying to just make sure that this is a midfield that works well with Paulo Dybala, who likes to drop in, and make sure that they have enough ball players, people who run into space, So I think that most of what he's trying to do right now is just to ensure that there's tight lines. They don't they don't concede when they are defending, and then be able to give them a springboard to allow the beauty of sort of the direct play that is Alvaro Morata and Federico Chiesa, and make sure that Dybala has enough time on the ball to produce what we know he knows how to produce. What about your question? I think Inter overpaid for Correa. Huh, interesting.
This is intertwined speaking, not
No,
Mina's.
this is, yes, sorry, this is intertwined from Tampa, Florida. I think Inter overpaid for Correa. I think that's an interesting thought. I don't see him being more of a spark player I don't see him being more than a spark player off the bench, but not someone who can eventually replace Dzeko. I think I agree with you. Do you, Nikki?
Well, very different kind of player right away from Edin Dzeko. I think that needs to be said. Not a like for like sort of hold the sort of ball up, back to goal number 9 at all, which is what Dzeko is. I found Inter's recruitment this summer confusing
I agree.
as a whole. Now, the results so far have been pretty good, but the one thing that's been really clear sort of from talking to people is that Hakan Çalhanoğlu was someone that Inzaghi really, really wanted, right? And Çalhanoğlu was a big target for Inzaghi specifically, which is odd because Çalhanoğlu, in my mind, you're going to get the best out of him playing as a number 10. And so far Inter haven't played with a number 10. They've been playing this sort of 5-man midfield, which is, the classic 3-5-2 shape with Inzaghi, and he's playing more as a box-to-box role, which I don't think is his best role. And Correa at Lazio very often was playing as a secondo punta, which is, second striker, like behind Ciro Immobile when they were on together, or as an alternative to, in which case you lead the line. But these are all players who, to me, are starting to crowd up a central area of the pitch in a way that I don't see how it fits together. Lautaro Martinez is your number 9 now, and that's clear. Like, he is the center of the attack and everything should be building off it. I understand Edin Dzeko and Lautaro, because Dzeko will be the selfless target and Lautaro can play off him. Where do you put a number 10 behind them into that mix? I already don't understand. Where do you put a number 10 and Joaquin Correa into that mix? I really, really don't understand, because where's he going? Like, where does Correa get into that? Correa, the best I can see him as, stylistically, is an alternative to Lautaro, actually, not Dzeko.
Yeah.
But to me, it just feels like this is a player who, an alternative to Lautaro is not a terrible thought, especially because probably the more we learn about the state of Inter's finances, you need to sell Lautaro next summer, which you don't want to admit, but it's probably the truth, given you've just got 200 million euro hole in your latest bank sheet. So maybe he's the alternative to that. And look, Inzaghi knows him, got some good results with him at Lazio in terms of getting him playing well. But to me, in general, it smacks of, we've got a manager, we need a striker, we can't spend too much money, here's someone who's played with before. I don't think he fits into the team they've built in any obvious way at all.
Perfectly well said. Let's move on to the next question, which is from Francesco at Malik Fan. I think that is how you pronounce it. Is there a non-superstar player that you always wanted at your club? Mine was always Arda Turan to come to Juve. Always thought he was wasted at Barcelona. Mandzukic was the other, but that came true and he was amazing. Now I know, Nikki, that for you, non-superstar and then the word Mandzukic made you sort of think, huh?
Yeah, well, 2 things made me laugh just there. First of all is that Mandzukic scored, in my opinion, the best ever goal in Champions League final.
No, it's not the best ever goal. Come on.
I understand you're going to say Zidane. I get it. Zidane's goal wasn't a winning effort, so everyone's going to rate it higher.
Zidane against Bayer Leverkusen is the best goal.
And it's Zidane. But I think technically what Mandzukic did was ridiculous. For some reason, when you were reading that, I don't know what it was. Like, my brain's just being full of worms today. But you said you thought it was when Francesco said Arda Turan was always wasted at Barcelona, my brain went like, yeah, wasted, man. Like he was drinking or something, which is not the implication. That was actually what made me laugh. It's just this idea that Arda Turan was having a big party, which I'm very certain wasn't the case. So if our bar for a non-superstar is Mandzukic, which if that's the framing, then I'm understanding this is basically like, it's got to be someone who is not like...
Not Haaland, not an Mbappe.
Yeah, he's not a Totti, not a Mbappe, not a Neymar, I don't know. Then I'm going to say that I'm allowed a superstar in his own city, but not ever internationally, Antonio Di Natale. I was absolutely a football crush on Antonio Di Natale for a long time. And do you know what, actually... If you'd allow it to me, I would say Papu Gomez, almost for the same reason.
That's what I was going to say, yeah.
Because the two of them just make me happy. Because when they're playing football, I feel like I'm watching people who are having a whale of a time. I watch them and I think, you enjoy this. When Antonio Di Natale, in the later part of his career certainly, scores a goal, he runs off grinning like he's the cat that got the cream. He's just enjoying it so much. And he didn't leave Udinese. This is the problem. I'd wanted to come to my team, but he never left Udinese because once he got there, he was happy. And I love that happiness. I would have loved to take it and bring it over to my team, which is Arsenal. But in reality, you couldn't have done it because his happiness was very much rooted in where he was and what he was doing. But he had fun. Like, I remember him getting away with things that other footballers wouldn't get away with, like giving a referee, like pinching a linesman, his cheek after something. And you think, normal footballers can't do that. But Di Natale is just like larking around and being a giant kid on the football, not a giant kid, a kid-sized kid, frankly, but being a happy kid on the football pitch. And it makes me happy. And I didn't mean to size shame him there. He was quite short. And
you were so considerate.
I would have had that joy in any football team for sure. Who's yours? You've got to answer that as well. So you saying Gomez?
Well, actually, I'm going to tell you, like, my favorite Champions League moment, I think it was the Champions League, yeah, but my favorite Champions League moment, I think ever, yeah, was a particular match between Atletico Madrid when Arda Turan was still there against Barcelona. And I think you will understand this if in any way you understand the Middle East. Yeah. But the linesman did something or basically gave a foul against Arda and to Barcelona, and it just shook him to his core, Arda Turan. And he ended up taking off his boot and throwing it at the linesman. And that for me is just, I don't know if anyone ever watched that wonderful interview in which it was like George Bush and an Iraqi journalist ended up throwing his slipper at him. But it was just...
I remember that, yeah.
It is just such a Middle Eastern thing to do. And nobody understood it on TV. And so it was a little bit like, oh, did his boot come off? And I'm like, he obviously took it off to throw it at him. But that for me is Arda Turan. I mean, he reached Turkey, he got 16-match suspension, and there's been all sorts of jail sentences, guns. Maybe it's for the best that he sort of didn't end up at Juve, if I'm honest. But Valverde was a huge fan of him, which is why he ended up in Barcelona. And I too thought he was amazing. Mandzukic, amazing. There are so many players that I've loved over the years that haven't been necessarily huge. One is Nicolas Lodero, because I always liked Uruguayans. I wanted him and Suarez. This is before Suarez became like the ginormous name that he became at Liverpool, obviously. I really, really wanted them at Juve. I was so desperate for that at the time. Lodero's career didn't pan out the way that I think that it probably could have. Injuries and everything ruined it for him. I always was a huge fan of Calabria. Like, I don't know what it is about this kid, but from a young age, it was upsetting me when they went for Conti, because in my head, I was like, well, what about Calabria? Like, is no one going to give a chance to Calabria? So I'm really happy that he's come on and been become the player that I feel like was always destined to be. And I want him to really kick on from here. But I mean, if I go through them all, I'd be here forever. But, one player that I was really ecstatic to have managed to keep and hold on is Claudio Marchisio. And I know there was Paul Pogba and Andrea Pirlo and some of the best names ever, but Marchisio is the one that made my heart sing a lot. And one of the reasons why players like Arda Turan and didn't come to Juve, but players like Pirlo, Vidal, whatever did, was a lot with the way that Juve scouting was so impeccable, because it was also about people. It was about who you were as a human being, what you like to do in your spare time, what your ambitions were, what you felt that you needed to prove, which is why they saw so much in Carlitos Tevez, who ended up being so amazing for Juventus.
And Marquez is a great shout. I have to say, like, it's yours, not mine. I've given mine, but like I think for someone who like genuinely wasn't a superstar, because some of these, like we say, they creep towards it. He was nothing close to a superstar, but he was really good. He was really good and so important for Juventus. He absolutely was.
Yeah, tactically most intelligent.
But he was the one you had at your club, so he doesn't count.
You're right. He is one that I had in my club. Thank God for that. Okay, let's go on to the third question after we went down memory lane. This one is from Lumsy. I don't know how to say your Twitter handle, Lumsy.
I'm going to say at Olumide Adams. No, I'm sorry, Lumsy. We know you've been a long-term follower of our podcasting, and we should know how to say your name. We don't.
Maybe you can, on your, write to us and say us how we can pronounce your Twitter handle. But anyway, your question is, I don't know why a mid-table team didn't come for Simi Nwankwo after all his goal exploits. And also, why did Caputo move from a mid-level team to Sampdoria? I feel like Nikki will really know how to answer this one. Is it that there's no need for strikers in the league? Oh,
I don't think it's that. I think if anything, it's that there's actually an abundance of goal scorers in the league at the moment. Looking at the reality of Serie A right now, which is the highest scoring league in Europe, as we keep reminding you guys, highest scoring of the top leagues in Europe, certainly, and by quite a way. Lots of teams are finding those goals without too much trouble. Simi, I enjoy Simi. I've talked about it on this podcast. I waxed lyrical about him a lot last season, but his sort of purple patch that he went through last season under Serse Cosmi is still, in the grand scheme of things, relatively unusual in his career. He did have a great season the season before in Serie B, but he's not been prolific all through his career. He's got something, and I think for a team like Salernitana can offer something. I think he's got qualities that are awkward to defend against, with his unorthodox playing style and those long limbs. But he's not, I think I talked about this last week or the week before, he's not someone who I think technically is a top player. I think he's an interesting player, but I don't think he's technically top player. So I think he's at the right level for him, and I hope he does well there. Although Salernitana, well, they have won a game now, but it feels to me like their recruitment has been a bit haphazard as well, unfortunately. As for Ciccio Caputo, again, we're talking about a striker in the latter phase of his career who has something to offer, for sure, but I just don't know what team you would see higher up the table that is screaming for a Ciccio Caputo. The Inters, the Milans, the Romas of this world have their sights set a little bit higher, certainly don't want to spend the money on someone in that age category with a relatively recent track record of scoring the number of goals they need. And Sampdoria are a team who are able to spend a bit on one or two good players. And they've tried to do that. They've tried to put them together with Quagliarella, with Candreva. And I think at least in the team building process, Sampdoria would have liked to tell you that this is building towards a team that can compete for Europe. I'm not sure I believe that they can, but that is a team that thinks it can compete for Europe, at least within itself. And so I don't think it's a low level for him. I think it's just the right level for where he is as a footballer. I don't see him as a Champions League level talent, even though there's lots to enjoy about him. And so I think he's about where he should be.
I think that you mentioned just, the age. I think that's also something worth noting for Simi, because he'll be 30 this year.
Huge.
And that is also again, if you are like a Sampdoria, for example, and you are going to go for a football, you'll probably go more for Caputo than you would go for Simi. There's resale values. I think also, considering we're in COVID times, people are more looking for how they can actually sell on a player and make some money out of it. the kind of transfers that include like Damsgaard coming in for 7 million and potentially being sold for much higher. So scouts are working on these things right now, unfortunately. And considering how much we look abroad, when you consider the Udinese, I think are in the top 5 in all the top 5 leagues to build 80% of their team is foreign. It is what it is. I mean, they're coming from different lands. They're not even coming from Serie A or Serie B. So I do think that's probably why some people don't want to take chances at the moment, especially not anyone who is of a certain age.
Our last question we've got, which comes from Barfly Sports at Barfly Coaches. Which was the first non-domestic or team you didn't follow football shirt that you bought? Mine was a Juventus shirt in the 1980s from a store in Majorca. And we got a photo with this one, and it's the old Ariston sponsored strip with the tricolore just above it. I think it's one of the, I don't know, it's a good looking classic kit.
What is...
So do you have an answer, Mina?
Okay, so my first, probably my only footballing club crush. I don't remember like ever really being like into a footballer. But for me, the only player that I was madly in love with and I pretty much stalked basically was Pierluigi Casaraghi. And yeah, I was obsessed with him and him coming for Euro 96 and to Chelsea. And I don't live too far from the stadium. I was like rather obsessed with him. So for me, Lazio shirt was a shirt that I had bought, and I actually thought and convinced myself that I was a Lazio fan. And then obviously I didn't understand all these things. I mean, it all sort of wiped away as soon as I saw Del Piero's back heel. I was like, who is this? You know? But Del Piero was a football crush, like as in, wow, the way he played the game. But Casaraghi was like wow, he's so good looking. So that was the difference between the two. So I had a Lazio shirt and I also had a Barcelona one because my dad bought it for me. And I'm not a fan of Barcelona. Never really have been, barring Ronaldinho. So, but yeah, I did have that shirt just because we spent so much of our time there. Oh, and I also have one from Besiktas in Istanbul. What about you?
So I'm trying to work out what I'll be allowed here.
Why?
Because as I've discussed literally last week on the podcast, my team is Arsenal. Yeah. But I do have family with Inter leanings. So an Inter shirt, will that count as a football shirt for a team I didn't follow? Probably as a kid, I felt more like I was like my second team was Inter, because when you're a kid, you feel like more like that's a thing. Whereas as an adult, I don't feel that way about it. So maybe it shouldn't count. If it does count, then if I'm allowed it, then I would say Christian Vieri Inter shirt.
Okay.
Which I bought from a market. We used to go on, we would be in Italy every summer when I was a kid. I grew up in England, but half Italian family. I was in Italy every summer. And anyone who has spent much time in Italy will know that bootleg shirts in markets are a thing. Barely anyone buys the actual official replica kits. Clubs are working harder and harder to try and help fans be encouraged to buy the actual replica kits, but normally everyone buys the knockoff ones. So it was one of those Inter shirts. If you looked at it too closely, you'd be like, that's not the Inter badge, but you know,
it will do.
Close enough. If that doesn't count, then I actually got, when he was briefly at Perugia, I got a Hidetoshi Nakata Perugia shirt. Same thing though, very much not the real deal. Very much one of those bootleg ones. But yeah, I was in Italy one summer and I had some very sort of football nerdy friends, and I actually honestly, if I'm being totally truthful about him at that age, I think I was less sort of aware of who he was and really sort of across what he was doing than some of my football nerdy friends were. But I thought, I saw a name and I was like, oh, I'm going to get that because Matt will be impressed. And I did. So yeah, for probably the equivalent of like €5, because yeah, those bootleg markets, you can often get a bargain.
Yeah, and then we wonder why there's no commercial revenue for Italian teams.
Yes.
And merchandising revenue.
It's actually really interesting, some of that stuff. You know, you see some of the big clubs in Italy have really tried to do things like in a completely different way to Premier League clubs. Some of the top Italian clubs have like actually almost created two versions of replica jerseys. So you get like the proper replica jersey, and there's another version that's like a €10 version, which is slightly nicer than the one you can get at the market. So you sort of trying to cut off that sort of €10. I might be gone lower than it actually is. I might be like 15 or 20, but still like a version that's a lot cheaper than the main one, because you know you're competing with the one in the market, and so you're trying to make one that's a bit more accessible. But yes, it is a problem for Italian clubs, that culture. It definitely is a revenue stream that they it's not even so much the revenue stream that you lose from selling the shirts themselves. What you lose is the value in the sponsorship deals with the shirt sponsors, because shirt sponsors know they won't sell as many as they would with the Premier League clubs. So it's a challenge. It's genuinely a thing that Italian clubs have been wrestling with.
Well, a former Premier League player who made a lot of money, his kid wanted a Ronaldo Juventus shirt at the time, and he asked me if I could get like a bootleg one when I was next in Turin for €10, you know? I was like, come on, you can afford the full, like, proper, like, official kit. So, but this is how famous these shirts are. So anyway, thank you all for your questions, and we hope you enjoyed the Serie A Chronicles Q&A. Please do keep them coming and get your questions in on Twitter at Serie A Chron Pod with the hashtag Chronicles Q&A. Subscribe to the Serie A Chronicles podcast on your favorite podcast app. I wonder which one is mine. I listen to various podcasts on various platforms.
Do you really?
Yeah. It's really weird. It's like
I have two apps. Yeah.
I feel like I have all my football on Apple, but then I have like Spotify is like my fun stuff. Like, oh God, that sounds like football isn't my fun stuff, but you know what I mean? Like, you know.
No, I get it. Football is our work.
Yeah.
Like, not that we don't enjoy it, but like you have things that are separate from work. I do get that. I do.
But please give us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. Again, please only note this if this is positive. Otherwise, sod off. But then why are you listening to this anyway? I'm just joking. You can follow Serie A Chronicles on social media.
She's not joking.
I am the witch of Serie A. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And now we even have a Telegram channel. I don't even know this anymore. I'm like a millennial. I'm not Generation Z. So please consider supporting the show at serieachronicles.com/supporter. Like I said, we are in alliance with Jeff Bezos, and we are coming to dominate the world. So either way, thank you so much. Keep those questions coming in, and ciao for now.
Social Podcast Network.
The holidays start here at Baker's with a variety of options to celebrate traditions old and new. Whether you're making a traditional roasted turkey or spicy turkey tacos, your go-to shrimp cocktail, or your first Cajun risotto, Baker's has all the freshest ingredients to embrace your traditions. Baker's, fresh for everyone.
We've locked in low prices to help you save big store-wide. Look for the locked in low prices tags and enjoy extra savings throughout the store. Baker's, fresh for everyone.